Hello everybody, this is Jonathan Tran from Paramec Financial and Finance in 5 to 10 minutes. Today marks our final series on PPP loan for round 2 here, funding to help those who are struggling from the coronavirus pandemic for small businesses. So, we talked about how to borrow the money for first-time borrowers. We talked about if you're a second-time borrower, how you can qualify to borrow money, what's the differences. But a lot of people are going to be concerned about what is, hey, I don't want to pay this loan back, right? If you can borrow money for free, why not? Everybody loves free money, right? But of course, with the PPP loan, it can be forgivable, so that way you don't need to pay back the loan, but you have to apply for the forgiveness. It just doesn't automatically happen. So when that time comes, about approximately 10 months from the day that you sign your loan docs and you receive the money. So look at your loan docs that you borrowed it. 10 months from that day, you need to apply before that, right? So that you can get your forgiveness application in. Now, it doesn't mean that in 10 months, don't wait till the last minute, try to do it a little bit earlier, but 10 months is your timeline that you have to apply. Now, how do they calculate it? Now, if you got the loan prior to June of last year, you have an 8-week calculation that you can use if you want, or you can do a 24-week calculation. So what does that mean? What that means is that if you're going on an 8-week calculation from the day you borrowed that money, 8 weeks out, all the expenses that you accrued in those 8 weeks, you can use that to offset your PPP loan so that you can give it forgiveness. Now, on the second option is 24 weeks. So 24 weeks out is a much longer period. It may be easier for you to accumulate qualified expenses so that you can forgive your loan in the 24-week period. But whichever is more beneficial. If you covered all your loan amounts in 8 weeks, then use it 8 weeks. If you didn't cover it in 8 weeks, then maybe you need to use it for 24 weeks and you use that. So what kind of qualified expenses so that you can get the forgiveness? The first main one is the payroll, right? Payroll that you paid to your employees, to yourself, those are items that can be used for forgiveness. And you can use 100% of this for it. And if it covers your whole entire loan, then great. If it doesn't, then the minimum that you have to use is 60% of the money that you borrowed needs to be used for payroll. So say you borrowed $100,000, then $60,000 of what you borrowed has to be a minimum for payroll. Now, if you use 100%, then you just give all the calculations for your payroll, 100%, 100,000, then you're good. But if you're like, hey, you know what, like I didn't use all of it for 100,000, so what do I do now? So the other 40% is considered non-payroll expenses. So non-payroll would be if you own your building, the business mortgage interest, you can use that as an offset. You can use your rent or lease payments. So say you don't own your own building, but you rent like your store, your restaurant, right? Or you rent an office. You can offset the loan by using the rent cost as well. Now, if you use the rent, you have to show proof of your lease agreement, okay? You just can't say, hey, I just paid some random dude this money to cover for PPP loan. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to have a legal agreement, lease agreement. Same thing for the mortgage interest. You just can't claim it you have to show proof that you actually paid it through your mortgage statement, right? And then finally, business utility payments. So if you have a utility bill, water, gas, phone, internet, those are qualified expenses to calculate for your PPP loan forgiveness as well. And so all these things, so mortgage interest, your lease, rent agreement, payments, and your utility payments, these 3 things you can use for forgiveness, and it can be up to 40% of your loan amount, right? So 40% of that can be in that area, non-payroll expenses. The other 60% has to be in payroll expenses. How do I submit this form? And depending on how much money you borrowed, there's different forms. The 3508 form you would fill out. Most lenders have an online form, so thank you so much for doing electronic forms. So easy, right, guys? So whoever you borrowed your loan from, they should have a portal where you can log in. It'll have all your information in there, and all you do is just plug in the numbers I told you about, right? Hey, how much did I pay for my payroll? You plug in all the numbers. How much did I pay for my rent? Plug in the numbers. How much did I pay for my utilities? Put in the number, right? And if you add it all up, it will let you know how much you qualify for forgiveness for. Now, prior to January, if you got an EIDL loan advance, let's say you got $1,000 to $10,000, you're actually supposed to deduct that from your loan forgiveness. But then they did away with that. So when you run your calculation, for those of you who borrowed the first loan, make sure you don't deduct that from your loan forgiveness. Otherwise, you're going to owe automatically $10,000 or however much money you borrowed on the EID loan advance, right? Another thing is that if you pay yourself as an owner of the business, there's a limitation. So you just can't pay yourself a whole bunch of money. You can't. The cap for owners if you own multiple businesses, it's an aggregate of all, right? So if you're an owner of the business, you can't pay yourself more than $20,833 for a 24-week calculation period. If it's an 8-week calculation, you can only do about $15,000, right? So you just can't pay all the money to yourself and say, hey, I'm going to forgive the loan, right? Now, if you have other employees, they may ask for proof that you did not lower anybody's salary or their payroll more than 25%, right? You have to keep your payroll running. Also, you cannot pay any high-earning employee more than $100,000, right? So if they take $100,000, you divide it over a 24-week period, it comes out to about like $40-something thousand. You cannot pay them too much money, right? So just be careful on those things if you're applying for loan forgiveness, that you do the payroll correctly. Now, some people may ask, hey, you know what? I don't have a company. I'm a 1099. I'm a self-contractor, self-employed person. How do I qualify for the forgiveness? So what they will do for those of you who are 1099 is that they will ask you to take a look at the money that you use for rent and utilities if you have it first, right? You deduct that out. And then whatever the difference is, then you would just write a check to yourself for the remaining amount of the loan. So say you borrowed $10,000, you rent like an office for like $500 a month. So that's about, say, $3,000 over a 24-week period. And then you had a cell phone bill or phone bill, internet bill, that's another $1,000. So now you have about $4,000 in expenses. So those $4,000 would go to your write-off for the non-payroll expenses, and then you would write yourself a check for $6,000. So then you would submit that as your payroll for the forgiveness if you're a self-employed, sole proprietor, or whatnot. Okay. In a nutshell, highlights: loan can be forgiven up to 100% if you use it right. 60% minimum has to be used for payroll. If you want to use up to 100, you can. 40% has to be non-payroll expenses, rent, mortgage expense, utilities, right? And then make sure you keep track of all your documentation. Make sure you have a copy of your lease agreement, copies of your canceled checks, copy of your bank statements, because they may ask for that, right? So just get ready to have those things available, proof, your bills that show that you paid your bills, invoices, whatever you have to show to the lender that, hey, I did use these monies for qualified expenses, and that way you can get your loan forgiven, right? And there's no sense in paying back anything if you don't have to. So as much as you can forgive it, right? Dates is what, 10 months from the day you borrowed it, and then you use a 24-week period to calculate it. So from the day that you received it, keep all your expenses tracking for 24 weeks or 8 weeks, but most likely most of us will fall into the 24-week period. A key thing that you should know is that all documentation that you have for your PPP loan, you must keep for at least 6 years after the loan that you got the loan. Okay, so keep your information, scan it, put it into a cloud drive, put it in your Google, whatever it is, but keep those documentations for at least 6 years. All your proof of your expenses, what you used the loan for, everything. In case the SBA decides to come back and audit you, have all that paperwork ready, okay? So I hope that information is very useful for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this series on PPP loan for round 2. For those of you who are businesses out there, self-employed, stay strong, be safe, be healthy. We're all going to make it through together, right? So I hope this information was helpful for you guys. Please subscribe, comment, like below, and I hope to see you guys again. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.